I'm Shannon from Straits Times Singapore. Just FYI, Tony has accepted. It's mentioned here on Twitter. The question actually is regarding the debt reduction program. You say that from Sale of Edra, you regain 16 to 18 billion from Kanda Malaysia, the equity portion of the 11, 12, so on and so forth. It comes up to 42 billion, which is exactly what was owed as of March 2014. But isn't it the case that the land from Kanda Malaysia came slightly cheaper than that? And the question, I guess, is money from other businesses being used to cover perhaps some bad management on the energy side, that there were mistakes made with the energy side that needs to be covered from other sections of one of these businesses?
Okay, so first of all, a lot of questions have been raised on what happened to the 42 billion ringgit. If you remember, certain politicians started off by saying 42 billion hilang or disappeared. That number subsequently got changed to 27 billion hilang or missing, and now I think there's no more figures being bandied about. 1MDB in June this year issued a graphical description of where the 42 billion ringgit was spent or how it was spent. This is based on a summary of what is in our audited financial statements. So there is no question of cover-up. The facts are there, the figures are there, of where the money was spent, how it was spent, and what it was used for. Now, in a company situation, we are a holding company with multiple subsidiaries. We are also 100% owned by the government of Malaysia. I spoke about earlier about the business challenges, what caused the mismatch in terms of the cash flows. And what is clear to me is that the level of debt is not sustainable. But what you need to understand is, how did that debt come about? That debt came about to acquire assets. So as a company, we have the assets. Now we have to give up the assets in order to pay down the debt. That is the simple and straightforward answer to your question.
Sir, I'm Nisan from CJ Daily. You mentioned before that 1MDB, the way 1MDB do business is very different, that you use bonds and debts to develop projects, right? So until today, what has happened now? Do you still think this is the way to do a business successfully? Or do you think government-owned company should avoid to do business by using debts, bonds? And my second question would be, does 1MDB still need to pay the interest with ongoing rationalization plan with 2.4 billion per year?
So I will answer the second question first. As you know, I came on board in January this year, and we have met all our interest payments and debt principal repayments in the course of the year. So we are now at the end of October, so I think you can calculate how much we have paid in the course of this year, having not defaulted at all on interest or principal repayments. So that's the easy one. In terms of your first question as to the business model of 1MDB and the nature of using debt to acquire assets and to build businesses, let me start off by saying that hindsight, looking back, is 2020, right? You have perfect vision when you look back and you try to reverse justify or reverse ask questions about the past. The reality is this debt was not generated on day one. The debt was built up over time, and as you can see from our financial statements, the biggest increase in the level of debt was when 1MDB purchased the energy businesses, right? So it is important to look at the context of the decision making, of the time frame at that point in time. So 1MDB did not get 42 billion of debt in one day. It happened over a period of time, and in fact the largest portion of debt was incurred in order to purchase cash generating long-term assets such as power plants. So for me, looking back, I believe that every decision must be assessed based on the context at that time, and it has to be taken as a whole. And such questions, in hindsight, frankly, doesn't help us. What we need to do is to focus on solving the problem, and we must be given the leeway and the breathing space to solve the problem, whilst, of course, the investigations continue to find out whether indeed there was anything else that happened in the past.
Could you clarify on why 1MDB decided to fund its investment through debt in the first place?
I think I gave you the answer earlier on as part of at the start of the discussion. The reason for using debt was twofold. Number one, when you have debt or you use debt, it creates a certain discipline, because debt, interest has to be paid on fixed dates, and principal has to be repaid when it matures. That is in contrast to equity. So equity from shareholders, in theory, have no interest because dividends are only paid when profits are made. And secondly, equity does not have to be returned on a predefined date unless it is requested back from the shareholder. So it's a fundamental difference between debt and equity. So when you take debt, you are forced to pay the interest and the principal at certain points in time. That makes you or gives you a certain discipline to either run your business in a way to generate those cash flows or to dispose of your assets in order to pay back the debt. That's number one. Number two, by using debt to acquire those assets, the government funds were able to be used for other purposes. So instead of the government injecting equity into 1MDB, the government, those funds that would have been equity was raised through debt, and therefore those government funds could be used for other purposes, for example, building schools, hospitals, roads, and so on. So that was why debt was the basis for 1MDB. Now, of course, as I mentioned earlier, debt creates a certain discipline. So when you use debt, there is a need to service the debt and pay back the principal. I'm sure all of you have credit cards, mortgages, personal loans, car loans, and so on. If you do not meet your debt repayments, the repercussions are very high. So because of the cash flow mismatch in the company, where as a result of the delayed IPO, debt was not repaid or surplus cash was not generated, the company faced a cash flow mismatch, and this is the challenge facing 1MDB. So we have to take the difficult decision to sell our assets in order to pay back the debt. But remember, the debt was acquired because the assets were acquired. So when you sell the assets, you pay off the debt. And that's the simple explanation.
I have a quick question on EDRA. We were told that the two foreign bidders may form a consortium so we can confirm that all the time.
So there are three bidders, as you know, one domestic and two foreign. At the moment, we are going through the confirmatory due diligence as well as the SPA process. So at the end of that process, we will be receiving best and final offers, which we expect to come in very shortly. I think the bidders now are aware of who they are. I cannot speak on their behalf. Whether or not they will form a consortium is up to the bidders. We will await the final outcome as and when it is issued.
With the sale, you said earlier that you expected to take away some 16 billion of debt, which I assume includes the 6 billion in debt being taken over by the buyer, right?
That's correct. So when we receive payment for the sale of EDRA, that payment will have two parts basically. One part is the equity value. So how much cash will we get for the equity in EDRA? And secondly, a big portion of the debt in EDRA is project finance debt. So this is debt that is in the operating companies of EDRA that were instituted when those power plants were first built. So that project finance debt is secured against the PPA cash flows, as well as certain assets of those operating companies. And that portion of the debt will move with the operating companies when the equity is purchased by the third parties.
So, but when one of you acquired the power asset last year, we paid a total of 12 billion again. And later on, one of the people recognized as 1.2 billion in impairment of goodwill. So this implies that Taiwan will be about 10 billion. Are you saying that bidders may well pay up to 12 billion? What if Taiwan will be?
So we will make an announcement when the SPA is signed, because at that point we will know exactly what the equity value will be, and also the debt portion that is being taken over. As I said, at this stage, we have binding bids already, and the bidders are undertaking confirmatory due diligence. We are also negotiating the SPA, Sale and Purchase Agreement, so that may have some impact on the final price. And once we have signed the SPA, when I have a deal in hand, rest assured I will provide all the answers to all the parties. But this actually raises an important point, something I mentioned earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, when 1MDB purchased the power assets, we paid a premium. And that premium is reflected in the goodwill, and that goodwill is on our accounts. Yeah? So just to be clear, there is nothing hidden about the premium that 1MDB paid to buy the assets. Now, why? Why pay a premium to buy assets? There are a couple of reasons, ladies and gentlemen. The first is that by combining the three separate power companies, by combining those companies, you reap certain efficiencies, certain economies of scale, and you position the combined entity to bid and acquire other or new projects. So the sum of the parts is greater than each individual company as a result of that. That's one big reason. The second big reason, as we spoke about earlier, is that the government had a strategic imperative to take over these three IPPs, which previously were owned by companies or individuals that were very closely connected to earlier administrations. So these were private companies benefiting from those IPPs. Now, the government wanted to take it over, and the main reason for that was to increase competition in the power generating sector in order to lower tariffs. And you would have seen this. This has been proven by the bids made by 1MDB that in many cases were the lowest bids for certain IPPs. And a 1 cent reduction, as I mentioned to you earlier, a 1 cent reduction in the tariff times 2,000 megawatts times 20 years is about 2.9 billion ringgit. So I ask you to mull over that and think about that. By the government paying a premium on the one side, the savings to the rakyat and to the country is multiple times that. And this is why 1MDB is a strategic development company for the country. We are 100% owned by the government of Malaysia, and therefore our decision making is not just about dollars and cents, but also about the greater benefit for the country. Now, the government did something very similar with Plus. I think some of the business reporters in here may remember that Plus was privatized. It was taken private by Khazanah and also by EPF. And as a result of that, you will see the increase in toll rates has not been as high compared to previous years. So again, this is proof that there is a bigger plan, there is a bigger thought process there, and the power industry consolidation was one of that.
Hi, I'm Trina from Reuters. I just want to ask, because it looks like the central bank directive asking 1MDB to repatriate $1.8 1.83 billion still stands. So does 1MDB has any intention to actually repatriate that sum?
So first of all, we fully respect the authority and the right conferred under the law to the central bank for it to issue directions as provided under the Financial Services Act 2013. So the central bank is the legitimate authority on such matters, and it has the absolute right to direct 1MDB to repatriate $1.83 billion as has been publicly announced. That direction stands. It is in force, and we are obliged under the law to follow the direction. So I just want to be very, very clear on this, that the central bank has the authority, and we have the obligation to adhere to the central bank direction. What we have done since that direction was issued, and this is something we did even before the direction, and we continue to do so, is to explain to the central bank, both in writing and verbally, of what happened to those funds over time. So we have explained to the central bank that in fact what was originally $1.83 billion of value that was through the Petro-Saudi investment, over time ended up as $2.33 billion of fund units as of our last statements. But to be clear, the fund units were there from September 2012. I'm talking about 2.33 billion value as of 31st March 2014. Yeah? So the 1.83 billion in September 2012 was converted into fund units, and as of 31st March 2014, those fund units were worth $2.33 billion. 1MDB has subsequently redeemed in cash $1.4 billion of that $2.33 billion. That cash has been spent. We have explained previously on what. And we are therefore left with $940 million of fund units. We have further explained to the central bank that we, as part of the rationalization plan that was presented to the Cabinet of Malaysia, have proposed to the Cabinet that a debt for asset swap occur with IPIC. So therefore, out of the sum, $1.4 billion in cash has been redeemed. The remaining $940 million of fund units will be part of the debt for asset swap with IPIC. We have provided this explanation to the central bank. They have asked us for additional information, both in the past and today, and we continue to engage with the central bank on this matter. Again, just for the avoidance of any doubt, we fully acknowledge the authority of the central bank to impose the direction, and we fully acknowledge our obligation to adhere to that direction as it was issued.
Hi, it's Nisha from Channel News Asia. Just first, earlier you mentioned that there were plans for one reason why 1MDB is in the situation it is today is because the failure of IPOs twice, you said due to internal and external factors. Could you explain what those factors were, number one? Number two, you're asking why there are still questions about 1MDB when you've been open, but I can't really deny that 1MDB is now associated with a lot of controversy. How has that impacted the company, and how do you foresee it impacting the future of the funds?
Okay, so those are actually, quite long questions to answer, both of them. If I forget one or two of them, please remind me in a bit. Now, on the first one, the internal and external factors. The internal factors were basically twofold. One is that, as you know, the power plant companies were acquired. Two companies were acquired in 2012. So in May 2012, and then subsequently in October 2012. The third company was acquired in 2013. So there was a need, first of all, to harmonize the platforms across the companies. There was a need to institute common management to ensure best practice was translated across that platform. So that was a very big endeavor, and that was the primary reason why in November 2013 it did not make sense to do an IPO at that time. Yeah? But it's an understandable factor. 3 very big companies that needed to be integrated and harmonized. Now, subsequent to that, as again I'm sure you will understand, for any IPO or public event, you want to show the ability of a company to grow and to get new projects. So in the course of 2014, 1MDB was working on acquiring 3B, Project 3B, as well as Project, what is now known as Project 4B. So those activities to seek an IPO, to seek these new awards of power plants, which at that time were either not yet awarded and or not yet funded. Because once you get the project, you need to get the funding, the debt funding, prior to doing the IPO. So that was what caused the delay, amongst others, of the November 2014 IPO. Now those were internal factors, and those were factors in our control. I think I don't need to elaborate on the external factors, but one very key external factors was the significant brickbats and criticism thrown against the company, mainly by, actually almost exclusively by members of the opposition, to the extent that certain opposition members even threatened to prevent major investors in Malaysia, such as EPF, KUAP, Tabung Haji, LTAT and so on, from participating in the IPO of Edra Energy. Now, if the biggest investors in the country are prevented or criticized for purchasing shares in a 100% government-owned company, I think you can understand why it is difficult to undertake an IPO. So, in summary, these were the internal factors and the external factors that caused a delay in the IPO of a company. Having said that, we still have a responsibility to pay our interest, and we still have a responsibility to pay our principal. And we have been firm that we will meet our obligations, we will meet our responsibilities when they are due. Accordingly, we have taken the step that we discussed earlier, which is, given the difficulty in undertaking the IPO, we are selling outright the assets, and thank God we have 3 final binding and fully funded bids, or rather 3 bidders who have submitted final binding and fully funded bids for us to consider. So that was the first one. Now your second question was on the noise and the controversy. Right. Sorry, it was just quite a long one. The controversies on 1MDB have been there from day one. I think from 2010, 2011, YB Tony Pua has been raising one issue after another on 1MDB. I think much to his disappointment, nobody really paid any attention to him on this. And I think that's probably why he is so gung-ho in challenging me and issuing statements and wanting me to respond, because I think he's been ignored, rightly or wrongly, on these matters. What caused a turning point in the perception of the company was, number one, in November 2014, the announcement of a loss, 665 million ringgit loss. Because prior to that, every year, so 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 1MDB had hundreds of millions, if not billions of ringgit of profit, right? If you remember. So that was one turning point, November 2014. The second turning point was a repayment of a loan, a 2 billion ringgit loan, to a consortium of local banks. And if you remember, there was a lot of noise towards the end of 2014 on this 2 billion ringgit loan that needed to be repaid. And the Edge at that time took on the challenge to emphasize this issue facing the company. So I think that got the attention, that together with the loss, got the attention of the business community, and so on. Now, the biggest issue, as you are all aware, was when Tun Dr. Mahathir started his allegation of 42 billion ringgit hilang, 42 billion ringgit missing. When Tun Mahathir and those who were previously aligned to the government started their criticisms, that's when this matter became extremely controversial. So if you look back, again, it didn't happen overnight. There were various factors that happened over time that resulted in this controversy. And then, of course, there were the leaks from Sarawak Report, alleged documents that they posted, on a very selective basis to create a certain story. The Edge then picked that up, and we now know that The Edge, at least the publisher of The Edge, in fact, effectively stole that information, or promised to buy and then stole that information from a third party. And just to be clear, I'm not alleging anything. I'm just saying what I've read from media reports on this matter. So that caused another layer of controversy on this whole issue. So you can look back and you can see that why there is so much noise, and why, despite the answers that we have given, people don't want to believe us, because frankly, bad news sells more papers than good news or good stories. That's the reality. Having said that, and I think this is a very important point I would like all of you to at least highlight in your reporting. The government of Malaysia, in March, early March, the government itself, the cabinet itself, requested that the Auditor General Department, Jabatan Audit Negara, which is a very respected entity and has shown no fear or favor in its reporting, the government itself in early March, so just after Sarawak Report came out, just after the Edge articles came out, the government itself asked the Auditor General Department, Jabatan Audit Negara, to conduct a review of 1MDB's accounts. And I can assure you, they have been extremely thorough, and they have been extremely professional and independent in their work. And secondly, the government also said that the outcome or the final report from the Auditor General will be presented to the Public Accounts Committee, the PAC, which is bipartisan. So you have opposition and ruling party members in the PAC. So this means that very early on, when the controversies first started, the government itself said, let us get an independent party to review and let the output from that independent party be presented to the PAC, which comprises both ruling party and opposition. Of course, after that, Bank Negara started its investigations. There were a number of police reports lodged, for example, by Dato' Khairuddin. So therefore, PDRM, the Police Diraja Malaysia, commenced its investigations. Our entire premises were raided. Substantially all our documents were seized on the 8th of July by PDRM. And then in July, the Anti-Corruption Commission also started its investigations. I'm pleased to say that the Anti-Corruption Commission said that it is not investigating 1MDB any further. They also confirmed that the 2.6 billion ringgit allegedly in the Prime Minister's accounts was not from 1MDB. So you will see that a number of these investigations are proceeding. They were instituted by the government as early as March, so just a few weeks after Sarawak Report and Edge made their allegations. So in my mind, these controversies will be answered. So we have given our answers, but we have said, please don't believe us. Please let the independent authorities come to their own conclusions. And we have said from day one, I have always said, I'm prepared to attend the PAC, I'm prepared to answer questions to the lawful authorities of the country in the right forum for such matters. However, YB Tony Pua obviously, despite being a member of parliament, has a different view of this. He wants his limelight, so I'm also happy to meet him and answer his questions, just as I'm in front of you today, ladies and gentlemen, answering your questions. So we have nothing to hide. We have been very consistent with our answers. We have the facts, we have the figures. Now, of course, everyone is entitled to their own opinions. We respect that. We respect the investigating authorities who are conducting their investigations. And we continue to say, if there is any wrongdoing, then action must be taken under the law. Maybe I can meet this gentleman. Okay, and then this gentleman after that. Yeah? So could you stick it to one question, please, because we have limited time and we have other people. Yes. Yes.
Okay, and the foreign bidders, if they do get it back 100% of Israel, which could strategically important region assets in foreign.
Oh, I like your loaded question. So let's deal with the strategically important asset first. And please, can all the reporters show, or in your reporting, mention the nature of the questions you have asked. So they're not easy questions, right? I hope you acknowledge that. Miss, in terms of the strategically important, now power plants, power generating plants are of course critical assets for any country. So ensuring the stability and continuous generation of power is of paramount importance. So I think that's beyond doubt, it's very, very clear. Alhamdulillah, because of the policies of the government and the excellent job that's being done by the Energy Commission in Malaysia, we have multiple sources of power generation. We also have multiple parties generating those assets, so not just Tenaga. We also have Malakoff, for example, YTL, and of course 1MDB, along with smaller generators like solar, and other types of power producers. So we have a big reserve margin, and we have multiple sources of electricity being generated. Now, interestingly, in terms of power generation, and again, I hope I'm not boring you with this detail, but I think it's important. The power plant actually sits in the middle of the value chain. So the fuel supply to the power plant can only come from two sources. Number one is Petronas, and number two is Tenaga, for coal. So that part is very clearly in government control, right? As for the IPPs, it has already been the case that IPPs have been owned by independent third parties, right? So private sector, non-government. And that's been the case for a very long time. The third part of the chain, which is also very important, is the transmission, the grid, and the distribution, the sale to end buyers. That is controlled by Tenaga. So, in fact, the power generator, which has already been independent and third parties, is actually in the middle. The very important bit is your fuel supply. If you don't get fuel, you can't generate power. You can't generate power, you don't generate cash. You don't generate cash, you can't pay your debts. And all the power plants have debts, number one. Number two, to distribute, you need the PPAs, Tenaga to purchase under the PPAs, transmit and sell to the end buyers. So both these ends, the very, very important ends, are controlled or linked to the government. Therefore, when you look at it from that perspective, the third point I want to make on this is that Tenaga Nasional, TNB, under the PPAs, has stepped in rights to take over the operation of IPP under the PPA in the event the IPP does not perform or does not undertake its role. Okay? This is a very crucial point. So because of these three factors, because of the fact that IPPs have already been independently owned by third parties, in my view, in my opinion, it's okay for a foreign party to own that part of the chain. There are many countries in the world which already permit 100% foreign ownership. Singapore, Indonesia in some cases, the UK, US, etc. So I think that part of the value chain is acceptable, but that's of course my personal opinion on that. In terms of the second part of your question, will there be 100% foreign ownership? That is a decision by the government. So we will have to allow the government its time and opportunity to present that answer. From our perspective as 1MDB, we want to achieve three things. When we assess the bids, there are three things that we will look at. So the first and most important is the value. How much will we get value-wise for the sale of the asset? Secondly is quantum. So once the value is determined, how much of that we can get in cash, so whether that's 49% or 100%, and obviously 100% is better. Thirdly is deal certainty. How certain is the transaction to happen? So if you have two bidders, one who is a private company and has gotten all his approvals to buy, versus another bidder who might be a public company who, after signing the SPA, still needs to go to shareholders for approval, that deal certainty is reduced somewhat, right? So when we assess the bids, when we look at the best and final offer, we will look at these 3 points. What value are you going to give me? How much I can sell? Because the more I can sell, the more debt I can pay. And thirdly, how much deal certainty do I have that after signing the SPA, we can complete the transaction? So it remains open at this stage, but inshallah, once we sign the SPA, we will let you know the outcome. Okay, I think, sir, I'll take one last question. This gentleman in the checkered blue shirt.
My name is Kanda from David Online. Clause 117 of the memorandum states that any financial commitment or investment by 1MDB has received the approval of Prime Minister Najib. So how involved is the Prime Minister in the dealings of 1MDB? And second part of it, 1MDB's name has been tarnished really badly now. Come so much so that everybody's like 1MDB old. So how are you guys going to come back from that? How are you guys going to change public perception on 1MDB and make it a viable option?
Okay, sir. So I will answer your first question and then just remind me on the second, because I like to talk a lot, so sometimes I don't get back to that. In terms of the Prime Minister's involvement, now it's important to look back at the history of 1MDB. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I hope I'm not going to bore you, but detail is important so that you get the context. When 1MDB was, the origin of 1MDB was the Terengganu Investment Authority, TIA. At that time, it was a sovereign wealth fund. Yeah, so that sovereign wealth fund was between the state of Terengganu on the one hand and the federal government. So of course, when the state of Terengganu is involved, there were a number of parties under this clause 117. And this is, so I will answer your point. Under this clause 117, you had state government representatives, the Sultan, the MB, and then of course the federal government representative, which was the Prime Minister. The main reason for the federal government representative is that the federal government guaranteed 5 billion ringgit of sukuk, which are Sharia compliant bonds, issued by TIA. So at that time it was still state government, right? So in order for the federal government to protect its interests under the sukuk, 5 billion ringgit sukuk that the federal government had guaranteed, there was a need for the federal government to be involved in decision making that would impact. So if you read the second part of 117, it's actually decisions impacting the federal government guarantee. I think this is an important factor to highlight. So that's the rationale of why it was there. Now, of course, when TIA, the shares in TIA were sold to federal government, and the federal government took over 100% and changed the name from TIA to 1MDB, it moved from a sovereign fund to a strategic development company. So that was number one. Number two, the shareholding changed from state of Terengganu to federal government. And number three, there was a name change from TIA to 1MDB. So it's important to understand these fundamental changes, but of course, federal government continued to guarantee the sukuk. Therefore, there was a need for that article to continue being in place. Okay, I hope that's clear. So that's on that point. Your second point was, could you repeat that, sir? Sorry? The perception. Yeah, understand. So I would answer that in a number of ways, right? A number of ways. I think the first is this, that we have a responsibility to service our debt, interest, principal. We have a responsibility to complete the relocation of PUKL, Pekalan Udara KL. It's 2.7 billion ringgit. We have a responsibility to complete the infrastructure in TRX, and so on and so forth. So the biggest task that we are focused on today is to do that, right? We want to continue to pay our interest, we want to continue to pay our principal, we want to continue to complete the infrastructure that we have committed on. The second task that we are very focused on is the rationalization plan. So we want to substantially reduce the debt of the company. That doesn't mean zero. I think some debt is suitable, some debt is viable. We have to work out, finally what that number is, depending on what we sell. So we do hope to get to that stage. Thirdly, we want to cooperate on all the investigations that are ongoing, so that the right answers can be provided, the facts can be provided, in order for the rakyat and all the interested parties to get the final version of the truth, right? So these are the three biggest things that we are concerned with. Therefore, anything else will be a bonus, right? It will be icing on the cake, assuming we first resolve these three factors. Now, as for the perception and so on, I think I've said this publicly before. I agree the perception is tough and bad. But frankly, my talking about it will not really help. Talk is cheap, right? What is important is we must be given the breathing space to implement the plan. The investigators must be given the breathing space to conclude their investigations. The PAC must be given its opportunity to challenge, to review, to ask questions. And I think the sum total of all that will give the answers that all the Malaysians are interested in. So I hope that answers your query. I think just one, I'll take one final question. This lady in white, because we did black, let's do white, and we will finish at that point.
Okay, what you said about the fact that Bank Negara found one of the breach exchange control rules, isn't it damaging? Does it reflect bad? It reflects bad. Secondly, looking on the opposition, but even within the ruling party, there are members who are also doubtful about what's happening. And thirdly, on I think how you don't understand how you got how that works.
Okay, that's actually three questions. I thought I would just answer one. Again, loaded question, right? Oh, Bank Negara found this, it must be bad, right? And this is how perception is created and disseminated by members of the press, which has caused confusion in the public. I noticed you did not highlight the fact that the Attorney General has issued a very detailed statement on his review, or the Attorney General's Chamber's review of the findings of Bank Negara. I'm not privy to the investigation papers of Bank Negara. I do not know what was written in there. All I know is what I have read based on the Attorney General, who under the Constitution of the country is the ultimate authority on such matters. I think you will find that there were two press statements issued by the Attorney General. He was very clear, or the press statement was very clear. No offense has been committed. Just because you don't like something or you think something is wrong does not mean that it is a crime. That's my answer to you, Miss. So we have to let the lawful authorities to undertake as appropriate in their judgment the outcome. We do not influence any outcome. We do not know the details of what has transpired. So we can only rely on the authorities in their decision making and the actions that they have taken. I've already said earlier that we fully respect the authority of Bank Negara to make its judgments. We have fully accepted their right to issue the directions, and we confirm very, very clearly that we have to oblige per what they have asked us to do. Equally, we have explained to them what we want to do, and we hope that we can come to an understanding over time on this matter. The second question was on. Yeah, there's also ruling party members. So something I should have said very early on, and please put this at the beginning of your reporting when you write it. I'm not a politician, right? I'm not a politician. I'm a professional. I'm a lawyer by training, an investment banker by profession, and a restructuring specialist currently, right? So political matters, political questions should be directed at politicians. I can answer on matters relating to 1MDB. That is my responsibility and that is my job. I think it's not just those people you mentioned who have raised questions about 1MDB. The Rakyat have raised questions about 1MDB. The press have raised questions about 1MDB. And we have provided answers where we are able to do so. And again, as proven by this forum today. So if you don't mind, I would keep it at that, because I think whatever is happening on the political front does impact us. It does make it difficult for us when we want to sell assets. It does make it difficult for us when we are negotiating with counterparties. But those are matters in our control, and we want to do the best in order to get the best value. Why do we want to get the best value? So that I can pay down more debt, and so that we do not need to go to the government for funding, right? At the end of the day, the company took debt to buy assets. Now let us sell the assets and pay down the debt. That is the simple answer I would give you. And sorry, miss, you had a third about IPIC. So if you look at our balance sheet, if you look at the accounts of 1MDB, we have very clearly stated in the notes to the accounts that a number of US dollar cash deposits have been made and payments have been made over a period of time. A lot of those US dollar cash deposits relate to ABAR, which is a 100% subsidiary of IPIC. Just to let you know, in case those who are not aware, IPIC is a AA rated company, AA by all the rating agencies. It also has about $60 billion of assets. So it is a very big company, 100% owned by the government of Abu Dhabi. We have made certain cash deposits with IPIC. IPIC has in turn guaranteed, IPIC has guaranteed $3.5 billion of US dollar bonds of 1MDB, not just the principal, but principal and interest. So the total exposure of IPIC on day one was $3.5 billion of principal and up to $2 billion of interest. Today it's $3.5 billion of principal and about $1.5 billion of interest. So that is their obligation. They have guaranteed us. Now, we have those cash deposits in US dollars, and we have the fund units that, again, if you look at our balance sheet, you will see the fund investments that we have made. So we have agreed with IPIC that we will do a swap. So they will take over our debt, which, by the way, they have guaranteed, as we discussed earlier, and we will hand over the US dollar cash deposits and the fund units. Now, you might ask, why don't you just pay off the bonds, right? I'm sure you're going to ask that next question. And the answer to that is bonds are unlike loans. In a loan, you have a defined series of lenders, and you negotiate with the lenders, and you can prepay. Bonds are capital markets instruments. You have hundreds of investors, and in order to undertake a repayment and so on, you need agreement of all those investors, the identity of which changes daily because they trade. And secondly, when an investor makes a decision to buy a bond, he looks at the interest rate on that day, he looks at the credit spread of the obligor, and he has a yield to maturity that he takes in calculating that. So today, that particular bond is trading at a significant premium. It's trading at about 110, again, you have to check that. It's trading at about 110 compared to the face value of 100. So it costs us more to buy it back. And the bondholders will definitely demand a premium to cancel that bond because their future returns, when they first made the investment, they assumed a certain series of future returns based on the coupon. They will not have that anymore. So it is much more complicated, much more difficult, and much more expensive to pay back a bond or redeem a bond compared to a loan. And particularly in this situation where we have the cash and we have those units that over time will generate income and can be used, it is a lot faster, easier, and less complicated to do the swap. So that's the rationale. Sorry, I have to stop now. I'm really sorry.
I just want to know whether the minutes of the meeting...
Mr. Chairman.
Are they genuine? The minutes of the meeting, were they genuine?
I think you need to refer to a press statement we have made on this. I think if you look at that, you'll get the answer.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I represent the appointment today. Thank you for your time. There are refreshments outside. You are all invited.
Yes, so before we conclude, as I said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really sorry to drag you out on a Saturday morning. I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate the tough questions that you have asked. I hope that we have given you a bit of flavor about the background to 1MDB, why it was set up, what were the activities we undertook, why did we undertake those activities, the fact that we took debt to buy assets, the challenges that we have faced, how we've been very open about the challenges, and the plan that we have to resolve those challenges. So I hope this gives you, a better picture, better idea, and I hope that we will continue to interact. Our media team is around. Please interact with them, and I hope that we can all catch up again at a better time when we have more good news to share with you. So thank you everyone, and I look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you.